Please help me in welcoming Melissa Riche.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see so many people. I thought it'd probably be half the crowd of last time, so thank you all for showing up. So why this topic, Dream Homes of the Desert? When I started writing and researching Mod Mirage and visiting the homes featured in the book, I was really struck by a few of them that really leapt out at me. As you can tell, I was born and raised in England, and what we call stately homes in England are a dime a dozen. Think Downton Abbey. Not that I grew up in one, I should add, although our family home was a historic landmark. It was built in 1668. It was modest. I didn't expect to encounter stately homes here in the desert. It was a big surprise to me when I went to see some of the homes in Rancho Mirage that I was researching to discover how they kind of fall into the category, for me, of stately homes. They're not in the same league as Hearst Castle, obviously, but they're still pretty awe-inspiring. And the Desert Dream Homes I'm going to be talking about today are merely a few examples of people with a lot of money letting their imaginations and their architects and their designers run riot. Sometimes they did it with great good taste, and sometimes less so, but the results were always extraordinary, as you'll see. None of these are celebrity homes in the conventional sense. They were owned by people who had a big impact on American society at the time, people like Leonard Firestone and Robert McCulloch, who were engineers, and obviously Firestone was the head of Firestone Tires. And only one of the homes I'm talking about today was by a desert architect. In fact, the other three were all by big-name Los Angeles architects whose work is still seen today in Los Angeles. And that's really what the big money bought you. So this is what the desert looked like. I've chosen this historic picture because this shows you kind of Thunderbird and Thunderbird Heights, and actually, for whatever reason, all the homes I'm talking about today were in Thunderbird or Thunderbird Heights. And you can see up on the left in the top is Thunderbird Heights, this area here. And as you can see, it took a long time before anyone started building, even though the roads were there. So this is the first house I'm talking about today. This is known as Thomas B. Davis House in the book. It's also known as White Shadows. And when we first went up to this house, and it was one of the earliest ones we went to, my husband, who did all the photography, Jim Ritchie, all the contemporary photography, couldn't stop taking pictures. I mean, he took thousands up at this house. And the owners of the house were Thomas B. Davis and his wife, Dorothy, also known as Dottie. And that is a 1958 article from House Beautiful, and you can see that it was really on its own up at the top of the hill. It was the highest point on the hill at that time, even though subsequently, about 10 years later, they built houses higher up. On the left is Thomas B. Davis and his wife, Dottie, at the opening for the party. And I want you to kind of remember those wood lattice screens that you can see behind them, because that's a feature of the house. I was really curious as to who Thomas B. Davis was, because when you see the rest of the house, which you will in a minute, it's so ornate and it's so over the top and so full of rich detail that I thought, who is this guy? Where did he get his money from? I hadn't seen sort of riches like this in a house since I lived in France and went to chateaus. It was just so astonishing to me. So I subsequently discovered that he was the heir to the Weyerhaeuser fortune. And he had his own furniture-making business that was very successful, that supplied furniture to big retailers like Sears. And so his mother had died, actually, just before they started work on this house. So obviously he had some cash in his pocket, and he needed something to do with it. This is what the front of the house looks like, and this is what it looks like from the road. It was designed by Henry Eggers of Eggers and Wiltman, who was quite a famous LA architect. And the front side of it's actually quite unassuming. It has these round walls in front of patios and a very discreet entry. And as you get towards the front door, you see these round walls enclosing all the patios and these deep eaves. But it's still kind of a secretive house. It's not really giving anything away. These are really my husband's artistic photographs, and the owners of the house really enjoyed these. So this is the entry patio. Here you can see the curved wall around the entrance. And what's really wonderful about this house is the fact that the owners did nickname it White Shadows, because White Shadows is really what you see at this house. And this is a perfect example. There's a kind of pergola shape at the top of the ceiling of this patio. And throughout the day, as the sun moves around, you have these changes in shadows. So this is just going to the front door of the house. And this is what it looks like inside. So as soon as you walk through the kind of front gate, you're inside a replica of the Alhambra, if any of you have ever been to Spain. It's very much a southern Spanish idea. I used to live in Spain, and I've been to a lot of houses there where having an inside courtyard as soon as you walk through the front door is very classic Spanish idea. It keeps the house cool and gives people a sort of sheltered and shady spot as well. So this is what it looks like today. A previous photo was from a House Beautiful article. The colonnades that you see around this are very much a feature of the house. You have these kind of squared-off columns at the top with these narrow poles beneath, marble floors all the way through. The marble fountain actually is original to the house, although the bit in the middle has been added. And I discovered from the family, who I got in touch with through a long story that I don't have time to explain here, that this was a lump of marble that was actually imported intact from Italy and then carved on site because they were afraid it would break. And then these are the wood lattice screens that I was telling you about. And what was interesting to me was the fact that Thomas B. Davis, a furniture factory, created a method of milling the woodwork so that these didn't have to be hand-carved, they could actually be machine-carved. And that becomes a feature of the house as well. There are sort of various versions of these screens that provide light and shade to the house. This gives you an idea of what the living room looked like back in 1958. House Beautiful had done a 22-page feature on the house. Elizabeth Gordon, who was then the editor of House Beautiful, was a big fan of Henry Eggers, the architect. And they also partnered with a famous interior designer called T.H. Robsjohn Gibbings, which is always a bit of a mouthful, but he's a very famous interior designer. He was also a famous furniture designer. And all the furniture that you see here, including the lamps by the fireplace, tables and chairs and side tables and everything, were all designed by Robsjohn Gibbings. Even the furnishings on the patio outside were designed by him. And he was also really responsible for designing the sliding lattices that go back and forth to screen the house at different times of day. So this is what the living room looks like today. They've got rid of some of the garish colors. It's very calm and very airy, and obviously the sliding windows are behind those sliding wood screens, and they mean that you can get air coming in all day without necessarily having bright light coming in. And you'll see again that the colonnade that we saw in the interior has been replicated here in walnut. So we've got the same style of columns here as you saw in the courtyard. Another view of the living room. So the screens are on two sides, and the side on the right looks out to the courtyard that you see as you come into the house, and then this side looks out to the pool. And all of these can be slid right back, as well as the sliding doors behind them. So on the terrace outside, we had the most amazing views. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about this house is that Mrs. Davis, Dottie Davis, was a world traveler. And what's even more curious is that she actually was originally a farm girl from Mississippi. And when I started talking to family members who, as I say, I got hold of well into writing the book, they told me a story about Dottie that I found pretty amazing. And that is that she was living in Canton, Mississippi, and she used to see Thomas B. Davis driving through on his way to work, apparently, pretty much every day. And she had her eye on him, and he was stopped at a red light one day, and she jumped into his car and announced to him, "I'm going to marry you." And the rest of the family rather frowned on her subsequently, as you can imagine. And this was told to me by the family. They said she was a really fast learner, and she educated herself quickly on the finer things in life. And the finer things in life are really what they achieved here. So she spent a lot of time in Persia amongst her travels around the world. And a lot of the light fittings in the house are actually Persian antiquities that she brought back with her. But this was the most amazing outdoor space for really enjoying these uninterrupted views across the valley. There was a lot of beautiful landscaping, and part of the landscaping was this original gazebo with these still pools in front. And these are all still there, I'm happy to say. And this is the other side of the house. And this shows, when you think back to what I showed at the beginning, where the front of the house has these curved walls, and then you have the side looking out over the valley with the colonnaded terraces around the swimming pool. This is another part of the house on one side where you have another pool and a fountain just behind it. So inside the house, which is really the most astonishing thing, this is the dining room, and this is all original. Again, you've got the colonnades of the walnut columns around here. You've got a domed, almost like a tent. I always think being in this room, dining in this room, must have been like being in a Bedouin tent. And there's the most amazing light wells all the way around as well that are bringing light. And again, we've got the screens at each side that actually section off the dining room. This is what it looked like in 1958, so you can see it really hasn't changed very much at all. One of the things I found out when I was reading about this house was that the trips to Persia had really informed Dottie Davis' ideas. So when she was working with interior designer Rob's John Gibbings, they were coming up with a lot of these ideas that really represented really Middle Eastern style, and that was something that meant a lot to her. And this is the master bedroom, and this also has a vaulted ceiling. And again, I think you can tell that that gives you a feeling of space, but also it's just unique. That I don't know any other house in the valley that has this at all. This window that it's covered by these wooden spindles, and these two the millwork was done at Thomas B. Davis factory in Memphis, and these are all walnut as well. They're really just incredible detail. So this is the bathroom is just to die for, and I have to say it's really difficult to photograph, so I'm giving my husband some slack here. The bathroom is made of pink Norwegian marble, and it's a round bathroom, and all the fittings are gold. And you can just about make out in the back these same columns with the squared off tops and the narrow uprights. reproduced in the same way that the wood and the stucco were in other parts of the house. Pretty sensational. And this room has lots of doors around it. You can see two of them here, but the doors lead off to things like massage rooms and showers and all sorts of wonderful stuff. And even the door handles are gold and ivory, and they're pretty astonishing. That's a frog sitting on a lily pad. Don't you all wish you had one of those? My favorites, the birds. So this gives you a floor plan of the whole house, and you'll see on the left-hand side was the servants' quarters, and this was common back in the 50s for what I call Rancho Mirage stately homes. Servants' quarters often took up the whole area next to the kitchen. I think I mentioned to you, they like the Thomas B. and Dottie like the finer things in life. He also really liked cars. And I found an ad where he was selling a 1958 Porsche Cabriolet with only 5,000 miles on it for $4,000. And I think that was quite soon after. I think he probably only had it for 6 months, and then he just decided to sell it, but kind of made me squirm. So this is, again, from House Beautiful. And this is what the valley looked like back then. So you can see how this is, remember, we're kind of now about 2/3 of the way up Thunderbird Heights at this point. So there's so little around it. And I discovered these pictures. Maynard Parker was a famous photographer, and he took all the pictures for House Beautiful in 1958. And I asked the family members, I said, so this doesn't look like Thomas B. Davis. And they said, no, I don't think it is. He looks too young. And I said, well, was it her lover? And they said, no, she would have chosen someone better looking. That's particularly true here, I think. So here she is handing a martini to whoever this person is, but I haven't discovered yet who this person is. But I love that photograph, actually, I really do. So that's the story of Thomas B. Davis. Just one last kind of postscript on this house. We had a launch party there during Modernism Week in last month, and the people that own the house now were faced with a real dilemma when they bought the house a few years ago, because the previous owner had decided to strip everything from it. All the light fittings, all the screens, all the doorknobs, all the faucets, everything that you've just been oohing and ahhing about was all gone. And they fortunately were told by a neighbor that the previous owner, who had foreclosed on the house, had taken everything, put it in a storage unit, and put it in a storage in Palm Desert. So they were able to pay her and get everything back, and spent the next 2 years reinstalling it. So next time you're doing a remodel on your house, just think what they went through. Okay, so my next, this house is about the same age and so different from the Thomas B. Davis house, but just as important and just as delightful. This is the Firestone estate, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with Leonard Firestone. He was really an important part of the community here. He started coming to the desert a long time ago, actually in the 30s, and he was one of the founding fathers for Palm Desert. And he got very actively involved in Thunderbird as they were developing Thunderbird Country Club, and he sponsored all the trees. I think it's about 300 palm trees that they installed. And he bought several lots on Thunderbird and built on a couple of them and saved the land next to him. The land next to him, he eventually sold to his good buddy, Gerald Ford. And he had become, by this time, Leonard Firestone had been the US ambassador to Belgium, and that's how he really got to know Gerald Ford. And they became really good friends. And Firestone was very involved in fundraising. He was involved in fundraising for the Eisenhower Medical Center, and he was also very important in the creation of the Betty Ford Center. So Leonard Firestone chose William PEREIRA for his architect. And William PEREIRA was another famous LA architect. He had designed the CBS studio building in the middle of LA, which is, I think, just getting historic status, and a lot of the Robinsons department stores. He also designed the first Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And he was originally a production designer. He won an Academy Award for his effects work on a John Wayne film called Reap the Wild Wind in 1942. And so his architecture could be seen all over Los Angeles. And he actually designed another home for Leonard Firestone in Palm Desert before Firestone decided to move to Thunderbird. He later became known for the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco, which I'm sure you all know. Very famous architect with quite a reputation, apparently. He was seriously into British women who were blonde, so I should have been around at that time, obviously. I just read that by chance the other day. It's amazing what you find out when you're not looking. But he ended up on the cover of Time magazine because he also master planned the city of Irvine, which is kind of between Los Angeles and Orange County. So for the Firestone estate, he devised a series of intersecting horizontal planes. And this was a style that he perpetuated when he added the guest house a few years later. So altogether, this house is about 8,000 square feet today, and it's built to such a high specification that I sometimes think if there's ever, God forbid, a bomb or something, I would be knocking on the owner's door because it's such a solid house. It really is. There's something about it when you walk in. It doesn't look like a solid house, but trust me, it's really solidly built. It's really a suspended steel roof, and that's one of the reasons that it has this kind of heavy solidity to it that just makes you feel like it's not going anywhere. And apparently, if it was built today to the same specification, it would cost $15 million to build. So here we are at the front entrance to the house, and it's like Firestone, it's very discreet, this house. And Leonard Firestone I have a lot of admiration for him, and wish I'd met him, but he was actually a very sort of discreet person. He wasn't showy. He was very philanthropic and very kind and very generous. And this house is kind of a representation of his personality, I often feel. In fact, PEREIRA had wanted Firestone to include white terrazzo floors all the way through the house, and Firestone didn't want to, so he chose this soft sandstone, which I think of as Firestone because it has a pink color to it that goes with a slumpstone brick on either side. And at the entry, you have the suspended roof, which has these a little bit like Thomas B. Davis, these light wells that cast shadows but also let light and air into the entrance. And that's from the entryway looking back the other side. You can see the sandstone pavers here, which continue all the way through the house. And you'll also see on both sides of the walls these clerestory windows that are part of the rooms on either side of the house, and you'll see those pop up later. So this entryway also has this lattice screenwork, a little bit like the Thomas B. Davis house too, but this is all made out of steel and just incredibly solid. You can slide these back, or you can slide the windows back, more importantly, and so leave security for the home as well as letting air through. And everything in this house was obviously custom made, but I love the details like this, the kind of tracks that everything runs into, and that makes for a very balanced way to move your doors and screens back. So this is on the other side, facing Thunderbird Country Club. I'm just concentrating on the outside right now. The present owners employed a designer called Sam Cardella, who actually was the person that convinced them to buy this house. And he made some slight changes and modifications to the house that really didn't interfere with the structure of the house, but this water feature here had been a planter, and now it's a kind of reflective pool, which I think is a really beautiful idea. So here again, you can see the stone pavers that continue inside and out. So this house is kind of glass boxes underneath the suspended steel roof, and you can see how the deep overhangs gave a lot of shade to the glass rooms underneath. So although the living room and the dining room and the bedrooms all have walls of glass, they're not impacted by the sun during the day. This is a good illustration of how the house works from the inside and out. And remember that one of the keys to modernism is that the houses were really built for indoor-outdoor living, and that's what dictates modernist houses. You have these deep overhangs, and you have lots of indoor-outdoor space. This is the patio that is by the pool, and PEREIRA designed these sliding doors that slide all the way back into the walls. And these are great because you know how windy it can get out here, and so that means that if they were sitting by the pool, they could actually be sheltered from the wind if they just pulled those across. And obviously they provide some security as well. This is, on the left, is the living room, and so you can see how that's shaded. And we're now looking on the pool terrace from the other side. And what we're looking at here is actually the dining room. So again, this idea of a glass box, which can open to the all the way open, and then the doors here that slide back into the walls. And the interesting thing about the glass and the brick that PEREIRA used is that all the brick walls that you see here, when they're on the outside of the house, also feature as a wall on the inside of the house. So everything kind of had a dual purpose, and it's really an amazing use of brickwork. These are the sliding doors that go back into the walls on the patio. This is slightly dark, I'm afraid, but it's inside the living room, and you'll see this is the wall that's on the outside that I was talking about. So that door that slides back in slides in here, and this is the inside wall, and you just saw the outside. Okay. So the bedroom, this actually used to be Mrs. Firestone's studio, and it's been repurposed by the current owners. But these are the windows that I was showing you at the entryway, and there's a room that kind of corresponds to this on the other side of the entryway. And so you'll see how PEREIRA designed for light to come in this way with by also maintaining privacy for the bedroom. The dining room is rather spectacular. You saw it from the other side, out on the patio. Leonard Firestone had a button on the push button on the floor, which is down here somewhere, that he could tap for service, or maybe interruptions when the conversation died. But what's amazing about these doors is that they slide all the way back. So this room can actually be opened all the way to the patio. So we're really talking indoor-outdoor here. And there's so little difference between the indoors and the outdoors in a house like this that it's really what makes it special. It's just everything about it is so unique and so beautifully designed, and that's why it became a stately home in my book. And this is an original bar. Every home should have one, and especially mid-century homes should have a bar. This is all original. This was a pass-through from the kitchen. This is the door from the kitchen. It has a peephole in it so that people in the kitchen could look through and see what was going on. And so all the tile work and the fridge and everything on here is original. That's the pass-through. The original fridge. See? Very cute. Like many of the homes at the time, sound systems were really important, and the latest technology was always incorporated. But if you had lots of money, you also made sure that all of this stuff was hidden away. And in this house, it's particularly well hidden. And that's the cabinet that encloses all the sound equipment. These are details that you'll figure out fairly soon if you haven't already. I'm a bit of a hardware fanatic. And so these are door handles, and this really, to me, this illustrates what quality is all about. When you spend this kind of money on door handles and hinges, this is why you end up spending the equivalent of $15 million on a house, because you have gold-colored, bullet-shaped hinges, or silver ones. And then these are the door handles for the lattice screens at the entry. And these are, I think, lighting and heating regulators. Okay, so that was Firestone. Moving on to Ichpermayapan, which is also fun to say when you've had a couple of glasses of wine. This might be better known to some of you as the house up in Thunderbird Heights, where the Obamas go and stay quite often. Michael S. Smith was the Obama's interior designer for the White House. And his husband, James Costas, was the US ambassador to Spain. And they bought this house in 2014, I think. And it was in really poor shape. It was actually pretty derelict. It had been left empty for a couple of years. And they bought it, and they have completely remodeled it. We were hoping to photograph it. It is in the book, but it's in the book as a historical item. We were hoping to photograph it, and Michael S. Smith had given us permission, but unfortunately circumstances came to pass and we weren't able to. So these are images kindly provided to me by Roger Davies, who took these pictures for Architectural Digest. And this shows you the house today. It was a 20,000 square foot house when it was first built. By house, I really mean compound, because it was several buildings. And I've actually read that it was 22,000, but what's 2,000 square feet between friends? So Ichpermayapan was actually built in the late 60s, finished in the early 70s, at the very top of Thunderbird Mesa, which is all the way up at the top of the hill. And so remember, the Thomas B. Davis was halfway up the hill. This one was as far up as you could possibly go, and it was on a 10-acre site, so really a huge plot of land. And like Thomas B. Davis, I was really intrigued as to where the people got their money from, because even back in the day, this was a huge investment for anybody. And the couple that owned this house were Maxine Cook and her husband, Howard Cook. And Howard Cook was an automobile dealer in Pasadena. So I don't know where he got his money from. I guess maybe he was selling really a lot of cars. Actually, there were a lot of car dealers buying homes at Thunderbird at the time, so I think it was pretty lucrative. And Maxine Cook, seen on the left, was a very successful women's golfer, amateur golfer. And I always recognize her in pictures because of her bouffant hair. She had the most amazing hairdo, and every single picture you see, it seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what's kind of weird about this house, too, is that poor Howard died a year after they started building it. And so she carried on regardless. And no, the man is, well, I don't know who the man in the middle is, actually, but you can see the hair, to my point. The woman on the right was Lily Pons, who was a famous opera star. And so Maxine Cook had these amazing parties up there, and obviously with 20,000 plus square feet, she had room for that. So this is what the house looked like in 1973. It was featured on the cover of Palm Springs Life. And you can see there was nothing around it. I mean, there really wasn't. Just like in 1957, there was nothing around the Thomas B. Davis house. So she worked with a local desert architect called Howard Lapham. And Howard Lapham had done designed a lot of houses at Thunderbird, and quite a few up in Thunderbird Heights too. And she decided she wanted this Mayan theme. Now, by this time, Sunnylands had been open for about 5 years, and the Annenbergs were obviously very influential. And if any of you know anything about Sunnylands, it has a lot of Mayan influences in it. So I don't know if Maxine Cook had sort of house envy, but she definitely was going for it when she had this house built. And apparently they had to bring in 400 skilled laborers and craftsmen and 250 suppliers and designers to create this Mayan palace. They had to use high-speed drill bits, which I guess is a good thing, because if they had to do it by hand, I think they'd still be working on it. Palm Springs Life in 1973 says that 30 chainsaw blades and more than 3 dozen carbide-tipped drills met their doom in the process. And I often wonder if that's what happened to Howard Cook. I don't know, the noise, can you imagine? I can't imagine what the noise was like. That's probably why there are no other houses built around it. So this is a picture from Palm Springs Life, and this shows you this giant, this is 6-foot diameter medallion that is a replica of a Mayan calendar carved out of a 700-pound piece of redwood by a local artist. And there it is today, still in place, happy to say. I guess it weighing 700 pounds, you can't move it that easily. Okay, so you get an idea of the Mayan carvings. I mean, it wasn't just one pattern either. It was a lot of different patterns, so it must have been pretty crazy. This was a stone supposed to replicate a Mayan sacrificial altar. I think every home should have one, right? I don't know if any sacrifices were performed there. This is what it looks like today. I think they've got rid of the sacrificial part. And this is the front doors are original too, and they were all carved. So inside the house, the living room was spacious and had 13-foot high ceilings, wide archways and glass walls looking out to a colonnaded plaza. And Maxine Cook combined her Mayan influences with Asian antiques that she collected from her world travels and showcased the treasures throughout the home. And this is what the home looks like today. And I think this is Michael S. Smith's design. Has a very elegant feel to it, and he's actually replicated in many ways the color scheme of the original. If I just go back. Even with the low stools around the coffee table. That coffee table was 10 feet long. This one, not quite so much. And again, another view of the living room as it looks today. He also kept a card table, like she had one. Here you can see. He's gone with the same idea. So this is the original dining room screens, and the interior designer, Edward Blood, worked on this house, and he included this huge ball-shaped chandelier, diamond-cut crystals in the dining room, so that must have been pretty astonishing when it was lit. This is today Michael S. Smith's design, but you can see the colonnades again and the view over the valley. So private spaces were just as sumptuous as the outside, and Maxine Cook's wing had 2 bedrooms, each with its own dressing room, as well as an exercise room. Her bathroom had mirrored walls and a 3-step down sunken bathtub, as you all should have. And the room looked out to its own garden, and then adjacent was the VIP quarters, an opulent gold and white guest suite. Then there was a tennis court, a tennis house, a wet bar, a living area, and another guest house that incorporated 3 separate suites and its own kitchen. There was also a game room and an L-shaped wet bar. So this is today's bedroom, and I think, again, Michael S. Smith, whether you like his design or not, has really kind of kept the palatial feel of the house, and it has a very serene palatial quality to it. Again, what it looks like today. So they've transformed the interiors and restored the whole house, so it's gone back to being a shining palace on a hill, and the swimming pool is still, as you see, this tapered shape with views across the valley. Pretty impressive, right? Okay, so I'm going on to the last house, and this is a sadder story. The last 3 houses we've looked at are all in fantastic shape, have been beautifully restored by their owners. And one of the reasons I wrote Mod Mirage is because I feel really strongly about preservation, and I'm trying to educate everybody, which is why I wrote the book and why I'm here, about holding on to what you have. It may look kind of old and worn out, but there are a lot of people who love the vintage and mid-century. So this was a house that belonged to Robert McCulloch, and Robert McCulloch was a really famous industrialist. America kind of ran on McCulloch motors, and not like Dunkin' Donuts, but more important in many ways. And so chainsaws and motorboats and even some cars ran on McCulloch motors. And he, like Leonard Firestone, was very heavily involved in the desert. At one time, he was the publisher of Palm Springs Life, and he developed a lot of other communities around here as well. So this was his house. He had it designed by Welton Becket, and Welton Becket was really known in Los Angeles for designing the Capitol Records building, for the Cinerama Dome, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, I think the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. In fact, if you drive around LA, a lot of the 50s and 60s buildings you'll see are designed by Welton Becket. He did actually start out in the 30s in LA designing a lot of houses. So Robert McCulloch chose Welton Becket, and this house was known as the push-button house. And it was in this Life magazine from 1956. And on the cover of this, you'll see actually 7 sun lounges, and they rotate. And the women I discovered were actually Palm Springs Debs. And the dog, the standard poodle in the middle, belonged to the McCullochs. So that's pretty astonishing right there. The house was the brainchild of Robert McCulloch, and he was pretty eccentric, and so he had his builders spend about 2 years putting all these kind of elevator mechanisms into the slab for the house. So it took forever and ever and ever to build this house. That's Robert McCulloch. Some of you may know Lake Havasu in Arizona. Robert McCulloch, was the man that bought London Bridge and put it up in Lake Havasu. So this is the kind of guy he was. And he would fly in from his home in Bel Air, as you do, with his kids. And this was while they were getting the house built, and it talks here about how the house was pretty special and had all these outdoor air conditioning and sunken tennis courts, which we'll come to. So this article in Life magazine explains how the house was built on a couple of acres and he didn't want golf balls coming through his windows, so he gave himself kind of a wide lee all the way around. And the sunken tennis court was because the rules at the time, probably still are at Thunderbird, was that you couldn't have lights above a certain level. So they had to dig down to create the tennis court. And this house was absolutely full of gadgets. This shows you the original layout, and you'll see, obviously, the swimming pool, living room. It was about 5,000 square feet, 6,000 square feet. It wasn't as big as some, but it was a good size. And here you'll see some of the gadgets. So he had, besides sound systems and everything else, he had beds that could go up and down for the touch of a button so that you could make them easily without having to bend over. And he had this amazing kitchen, this round kitchen, where 6 people could cook at the same time, should you choose to do that. On that sunken tennis court, they had a party for 500 people. So next time you're wondering what to do with your tennis court, you know what to do with it. They used to have big parties called Out of This World. It's a golf tournament. I think it still goes on. So this was the living room, and the living room was the scene of, obviously, lots of parties. I think the most amazing detail for me in this, actually, is the carpet, because apparently the carpet was designed not to show cigarette burns. I just love that idea. Talk about forward thinking. The mosaic at the back was done by a famous artist who had a PBS documentary. His name was Emil Norman, and the mosaic is still in existence, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's a pretty gorgeous house. So this was, again, from Life magazine. This is the kind of push-button bathroom. So this thing on the right-hand side had all these buttons for controlling temperature, bubbles, heat, everything. Huge chess set. And this is what the house looks like today. So you can see that the pool is completely changed. There's no circular sun lounger. It has kind of the same footprint, but the people that bought it in the early 2000s, around the same time the Maslin house was pulled down. And they obtained a permit to remodel the house, but actually what they were planning to do was pull out all those push-button gadgets and put in the 21st century version. So this is kind of what the living room looks like today, which, you know, I mean, if you like that sort of thing, I guess it's okay, but it makes me sad. So the sunken tennis court is still there. One of the mosaics, this used to be on the side of the house, and it was supposed to represent the Earth's strata. And for some reason, the owners liked it enough to keep it, but didn't like the house enough to keep it, and put that on the side of the tennis court. Hard to understand. So I'm going to play you some video now.
Okay, I want to show you this first. This is the push-button paradise. This is one of the features of the house. Everything is controlled. You turn all the lights on from here.
Oh my gosh, it looks like a control panel of an airplane or something.
Well, and this is the old control security. This is the new. But you also have push buttons at the end that open the drapes, close the drapes.
So this turns on literally the whole house right
Exactly,
here.
exactly. Even the pool lights and the guest house lights.
In the 50s, this was revolutionary, wasn't it?
Early 50s.
Yeah.
Unbelievable that it was done in the early 50s because it took 4 years to build. And it cost $750,000 in the early 50s. I don't think you could build this house today. I don't think that you could do it. He had to drill into the ground before the house was built to accomplish this. You can put your bottles in these openings, and they go down, and you can stack 20 bottles on top of each other.
So this goes down how far?
30 feet.
Can you bring it back up? If
Sure.
we're going to have a Bloody Mary, we have to have the vodka.
Sure. And you have 4 openings here, so you can have one great party.
Oh my gosh! So you could have 10 bottles stacked in each
Sure.
one of these 4 holes.
You could have 30 in each hole.
Oh my God!
So that's 120 bottles. You could have one party.
Well, those Texans did things in a big way.
This is for your ice.
Oh my gosh, look at this ice bucket. You'd need a big ice bucket. Wow.
I mean, it's just a spectacular house. Over here, you have 5 drawers for your chilled glasses.
Look at this.
I've never counted them, but let's see. 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So-
24 bottles times 5.
So this
Or
chills,
glasses.
let's close it back up. So these drawers are for chill glasses.
Right.
And look up here, all of this is operated. Do it again, push it again for us.
There you
See, There
go.
it goes.
And you'll notice this is Thunderbird Country Club. So these are all etched wherever you see the little
close it again.
Thunderbirds in the etched glass over at in the library here. And this is your refrigerator and ice machine. This is your crushed ice.
Crushed ice in here.
Right.
And look at this. This is beautiful.
That's
too.
all original. That was all done, and it has to do with McCulloch oil and another fun thing over here, Huel. This is great. Your barbecue right here in the dining room. Everything is push button. You can turn the light on from here. You can
at
turn
this
your
control
fire
panel.
on from here.
So wait a minute, you could turn the barbecue is right here inside.
Right there. And the fire you can turn on from here. You can raise your grate, lower your grate.
Oh my gosh.
You can raise your spit.
Look at this. The spit.
And this is the rotisserie that goes into
so the
here.
spit, you can raise it or lower it right over your inside.
Yes.
Let's lower it just a little bit, just to get the
Okay.
idea. Look at that.
Yes.
Look at this.
Isn't that beautiful?
And what is this?
This is all the original cooktop. 6 people can stand here and cook dinner. This has been replaced.
Wait a minute. 6 people could.
6 people. There are 2 burners on each panel.
Why do you need 6 people?
Well, I don't know. You may be having Chinese food and you want to.
Well,
do
there's
6
that
different-
Texas thing again. Everything's bigger and better in Texas. So they got six different top
cooktops. Yes, exactly.
And this is stainless.
This is all stainless. These were the original controls, but they've been covered over now.
And what
These
was
have been
this?
replaced. This is just
Look at
a
this
carving, a
wonderful
cutting
table.
board. But look how they've utilized the space. That you have the drawers that pull out on both of these.
Oh, I see.
tables.
So it's all built in.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
And this is all original. Now in here is another fun area.
Let's close this door so we can get back. Now, what are we doing in here? What
All
was
right,
this?
you
Oh, look at this.
You have 12 shelves here that rotate. I mean, this was done in the early 50s. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time. It's amazing.
Do you think he thought all this up himself, or did he?
He was pretty ingenious. Yes.
I mean, was this his vision and
I
he
think
hired
so.
the architect
Yes.
to fulfill it?
Yes.
But it was his idea to do it all electric like this.
Exactly. Now, if you can see the carousel over there, that was on the cover of Life magazine. He designed that where it has a revolution, I think, 5 times an hour. So you can sunbathe and you can have an even tan because
Wait a minute,
it
we got to
follows
go over
the
there
sun
and get on
around.
this thing. Oh my God.
And you can the
Oh,
back
this was
strip-
on the cover of
Yes,
Life magazine.
Exactly. And you can be horizontal, or you can have your back up. They're all electric.
Get on that thing, Ted. Oh my gosh. And it just moves around.
Just follows the sun.
I love this.
See, these are all electric.
Oh, so the backs go, where's the, There's
The
an
switch is
actual
right.
little.
Each one has its own switch. But see, it
Does that work?
turns very, very slowly, so it follows the sun.
Who doesn't love Weyerhaeuser? I mean, my God. And the woman doing the interview was Nelda Linsk, who's still there today. I just want to talk very briefly about Modernism Week that's coming up in February. Modernismweek.com. If you enter Rancho Mirage in the search engine, you'll discover at least half a dozen tours and events that are taking place. I'm also giving a talk at the Annenberg in February next year. And we, Preservation Mirage, have organized a Tamarisk Country Club home tour, and that'll be taking place on February 22nd. These are the homes that you'll see on that tour. I think it's nearly sold out, so just 3 of the homes are in the book, and they're all very unique, special homes. So do keep an eye out for that. So thank you so much for coming.